Hi there, Gordon Miller from G3 back again with another video. So I thought I gave you a brief introduction in video 1. In video 2 I talked about some of the history of starting G3 at age 28 and how we went through a number of different changes. First from educational and then corporate and then government and military opportunities. What I thought I'd do next is talk about some of the different companies I've started over the years and how those companies have been different from one another and what type of company you all might want to start and how you can make sure you follow some of our successes and make sure you avoid some of our failures along the way. So the second company I started was Harmonia Incorporated. Harmonia had started in 1997, and I came on as president in 1999. They had a really great idea about how to abstract the user interface from the programming environment, and I happened to be working on a project for the U.S. Army for the Army Training Information Architecture, and one of the solutions that was available was trying to abstract that interface that the soldiers were going to use on different environments. And so it was a very popular part of the architecture. I had actually designed the solution that we wanted in 1998, and then in 1999 when Harmonia came looking for an avenue to additional success, I was able to plug them into the Army opportunity. I got them their first contract. I believe it was a couple $1 million over the 3 or 4 years that they were on the effort. I think it was actually more than $1 million a year for at least 2 years, so a total of a couple $1 million. But the real benefit is that it was at a critical time when certain technologies were just taking off. The Army was going to code in Java, and the solution that we were proposing through Harmonia was worked with Java Swing, worked with other flavors of Java, but it also was primarily XML based. And so we developed what was called the User Interface Markup Language, the UIML, and it's on the OASIS Consortium. It's an open source standard, so you can go out there and take a look. But what we developed in UIML at Harmonia was eventually, it was said that it was too far ahead of its time. The Army was more interested in adopting something that was more like enterprise Java. This was, again, 1998, 1999. And so, you know, we did a sample of the interface in both technologies, in Java and as well as in UIML, and ultimately the Army picked Java, which was fine because G3 still got a chance to develop the interfaces for Java. You know, no big deal there. But Harmonia, you know, had an XML-based technology that it didn't necessarily know what to do with. Great thing is that the Navy stepped forward and said, hey, we love XML. We think that that's going to be the next generation of technologies. And so while Harmonia was way ahead of the curve, it was a matter of finding the right partners that were also way ahead of the curve in order to be able to find a good fit for that. Ultimately, Harmonia went on to develop several components of the architecture called the Liquid Apps, and did that under the Small Business Administration model. We were very successful in small business phase 1, phase 2, and even phase 3 commercialization. Had some tremendous success in getting the technology into the new DDX ships. The consoles on the new ships can you know, become every aperture on the ship, any computer screen can be a communications console, a navigation console, a training console, a weapon system console. So ironically, when we were coming up with the idea, you know, it came to me while watching one of the Star Trek episodes where the bridge was damaged and they moved to the battle bridge and they transferred control of the entire ship to some other remote part of the ship. Well, ironically, the U.S. Navy didn't have that capability, so we were like, well, we should build that. And ironically, it was something that the Navy actually really was looking for. It went on to that technology that Harmonia owns and develops became a core part of a number of different primary interfaces, not only for the Navy but for other customers. You can check out their website at harmonia.com. Right now, Harmonia started more as a products-based company, selling software licenses and to developers who were going to develop their own code, but ultimately became more of a services company, building solutions along the way, but primarily funded initially on small business administration loans. Great way to do that, either SBA loans or SBA grants, and the SBA Small Business Awards. It was a great way, $100,000 or so for the first phase to get something done, a couple $100,000 for the second phase, and then up to a couple million for the third phase for the commercialization. And the numbers have changed over the years, and so it's on that order of magnitude. I don't know the exact numbers, but by doing what's called laddering, where you have several different solutions at different stages. So you have 2 or 3 phase 1s going on, while you have 2 or 3 phase 2s, while you have the first phase 3. By having different solutions at different technical points, they were able to create momentum behind each of the components. And as you added each of the components to the suite of tools, it became much more valuable than any individual component piece. And it was a great strategy, very difficult to do in terms of winning that many SBIR awards. The Small Business Innovative Research Awards were the great way they went. The interesting part about it is that I think at one point their win ratio was something like 4 out of 5 or 3 out of every 5. It was ridiculous. I mean, most companies are lucky if they get 1 or 2 out of 10, and yet Harmonia had really kind of dialed in the Small Business Innovative Research grants as a way to do that. Terrific strategy, moved the company from a products company to a services company. I took a minority position in the company in 2003, I started out in 1999 owning 22.5% of the company, and along with the principal founder owned 51%, somebody else who owned 22.5%. So it worked out really well. The investors came in 2003 after the Army contract. It was they decided not to do it, and then the great thing is that the investors were able to get the Navy interested and work through that process. I ended up with a minority share of the company to make way for the investors, so that the principal behind it all wasn't diluted too much, and so the other original founder with 22.5% of the company sold out. I sold out, and I remained on the board until I believe it was 2014. I still had a board seat and still got residual checks from that. So my initial investment was about $400,000, and I probably doubled my money over the first 10 years that I was a part of the effort. So, it was a great opportunity. I probably made almost 3 times my money. But, so I guess you can say, started out investing, somewhere around $400,000 and probably made $1 million. But it took a while, and I wasn't primarily involved in the company, but it was a great way to get them their first contract, let them make their first couple million in revenue on a contract that G3 had already done. We brought in Harmonia, introduced Harmonia to the federal government, to the Army, to the Department of Defense, and that's where they got their start. And so the great thing about having a company and then starting another company is the symbiotic relationship between the two companies. So great opportunity. I'm really grateful for everything that I learned in the process of having a services company and having a products company, G3 being the services company and Harmonia being the products company. And ultimately, it ended up being those innovative products that were important to Harmonia, but the services have made Harmonia, I think, much more money over the years than just the products in terms of licensing the products. So I think that the success that G3 had in its early days contributed to the change in focus from a products-oriented technology company to a services-based company, which is great, good for them, and they've been doing great. You know, they've had several large successes. I won't quote their contract value because it's a private company, but you know, they've significant contract assets, and built that contract base off of the original SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research grants, and the early successes that the suite of tools provided them that allowed them to build much larger systems as they went on down their line, large enterprise systems such as the one for the IRS and other ones like that. So I'm really proud of the company that I started. The great thing is that the person who was the chief technology officer and the founder of the company had a great technical idea, did not have a lot of business experience, came from academia, and made the leap, quit his job at the university, and never looked back. And that was great. You know, it was great having partners like that, and it was good to see him succeed. And I'm grateful that I succeeded along the way as well. And it was a great experience. I really, I don't know that I would have changed much about that process. I think early on, when you have, about the only lesson learned from that experience, I think, is probably early on, if you have too many people with too much equity. There were graduate students that were working on the technology that received equity, and I think the hardest part for the investors when they came in 2003 was just getting the equity back from some of those folks that were international students that were living in foreign countries that had ownership in U.S. companies, and that gave us a lot of problems when we were working on trying to get government contracts where we have minority ownership of less than 1% or 1% by these foreign nationals. So it was very difficult. There were some things like that. You should be very generous with the equity, but very specific. You don't want to just give away equity to everybody. And I think that the equity distribution is important because as the company grows and you bring on investors, they're going to end up with, in most cases, almost or up to or just over 51% of the company. So it's important to make sure that that if you have multiple initial founders or owners, that there's enough in it for everybody down the line. So I wish them well. It's a great company, great technology. I'm very happy to have been part of the history of Harmonia, but it was great to be a part of that first initial contract for $2 million. It was great to be a part of getting the technology into the Department of Defense and getting them the track record that they needed to qualify for the other stuff, and coming up with some of the early ideas that led to the technology being adopted. So terrific capability, and it was great. The relationship between G3 and Harmonia has continued to work in our favor over the years as we play off of what one or the other has done, as we work together on multiple proposals. And so having multiple companies is a really strategic advantage. And as we talk about some of the other companies, you'll see just how those companies relate to each other and how they interact and what the benefit of that is. I often joke that somebody asked me a while back, they said, how come G3 isn't $100 million a year company? And I said, well, I don't know how to build a $100 million a year company, or I don't know that I want a $100 million a year company. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of people, things like that. But what I would like to have is 10 $10 million a year companies, and it's actually much easier to build 10 $10 million a year companies and make $100 million than it is to build one $100 million company. And so it's been a great process, and we'll talk more about the others, but that's my second company, Harmonia, that was founded in 1997, but I came on board in 1999 and was on board until 2003, and then investors came on board and I exited the company completely, I believe, in 2014 or I think it was 2014. So anyway, thanks a lot. That's the third of our videos here, and we'll go on to the next one. Thanks.